Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. President Joe Biden is calling on Congress to pass legislation to intervene and block a railroad strike before next month's deadline in the stalled contract talks. 4 rail unions rejected the deal the Biden administration helped broker between railroad workers and companies. 8 unions approved it. At issue is paid sick leave. The president's deal includes 1 day of. Biden said on social media that he's a proud pro-labor president and is reluctant to override the ratification procedures and views of those who voted against the agreement. But, quote, in this case where the economic impact of a shutdown would hurt millions, I believe Congress must use its powers to adopt this deal, unquote. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says lawmakers will take up legislation to impose the terms of the deal this week. If Congress acts, it would force the labor deal to move ahead. That includes a 24% raise over several years and a $5,000 bonus. Critics note railroads have reaped billions in profits and can afford to offer better paid sick leave benefits. NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg says war-torn Ukraine will one day become a member of the world's largest security alliance and blasted Russia's attacks on the country's power grid as weaponizing winter. He made the comments at a NATO foreign minister summit.
Russia's recent losses, including its withdrawal from Kherson, demonstrate the incredible courage and bravery of the Ukrainian forces. It also shows that our support makes a difference on the battlefield and must continue. The Russian military retains significant capabilities and a large number of troops. It is willing to use extreme brutality and leave Ukraine cold and dark this winter.
Ukraine's power grid has been battered since early October by targeted Russian strikes. During the 2-day meeting, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to announce substantial U.S. aid for Ukraine's energy grid. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia will launch another barrage of missile attacks on Ukraine. Air raid sirens went off today across many parts of the country, including the capital, Kiev. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko spoke to Al Jazeera.
We have deficit of 50% of electricity. It's mean 1.5 million citizens of our hometown without electricity. It's terrorism.
Ukraine's president says Russia's damaged the water supply to Mykolaiv and it's shelled some 24 regions around Kherson. More could be on the way. The Institute for the Study of War says Russian troops are preparing for a possible counteroffensive in eastern Kherson. In the U.S., the Senate is set to vote on legislation to protect same-sex and interracial marriage today, putting Congress one step closer to passing the landmark bill, ensuring those unions are enshrined in federal law. Senate Democrats are moving to quickly pass the bill while they still hold the majority in both chambers. The House still would have to vote on the legislation to send it to President Joe Biden. A test vote last night moved the legislation closer to passage, with 12 Republicans voting again to move it forward. Catherine Carley reports.
Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, the first openly gay person to serve in the U.S. Senate, is celebrating the passage of another procedural step to strengthen protections for same-sex and interracial marriages.
Certainly throughout the American public, the acceptance of marriage equality, the belief that one ought to be able to marry and protect the person they love is now, I would say, almost overwhelmingly supported.
The Respect for Marriage Act would guarantee federal recognition of any marriage between two individuals if the union was valid in the state where it was performed. It would also require states to accept the legitimacy of a valid marriage performed elsewhere. I'm Catherine Carley for Pacifica Network and Public News Service.
Chinese universities are sending students home and police are fanning out in Beijing and Shanghai to stop widespread protests there. That comes after crowds angered by severe antivirus restrictions called for leader Xi Jinping to resign in the biggest show of public dissent in decades. Authorities have eased some controls after demonstrations in at least 8 mainland cities and Hong Kong, but they showed no signs of backing off their larger zero-COVID strategy that's confined millions of people to their homes for months at a time. Security forces have detained an unknown number of people and stepped up surveillance. With police out in force, there's no word of protests in Beijing, Shanghai, or other major mainland cities today, though a small group gathered at a university in Hong Kong. The white gunman who massacred 10 black people at a Buffalo supermarket has pled guilty to first-degree murder and hate-motivated terrorism charges. Peyton Gendron's plea means he'll spend the rest of his life in prison without parole. New York does not have the death penalty. Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown.
Justice has been done. This individual has admitted their guilt, and the penalty for this horrific crime is for this individual never, ever to see the light of day again. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
I'm Christina Onnested, reporting for Pacifica Radio.